I grew up with the scent of garlic and rosemary clinging to my clothes, flour dust in my hair, and grease stains on my little notebooks. While other kids spent their weekends at soccer games or birthday parties, I spent mine perched on a stool in the back kitchen of my parents' Italian restaurant, Amelia's Table, scribbling fake menus and drawing imaginary plating ideas in the margins of my homework. The restaurant was more than just a business, it was our heartbeat. My parents, Marco and Liana Rossi, had poured every drop of energy, every dime, and every sacrifice into that place. They opened it the year I was born, and by the time I was old enough to hold a spoon, I was learning how to stir sauce, clean tables, and fold napkins into fancy triangles. I didn't resent it. I adored it. It was messy, loud, chaotic, and it was home. And from as early as I could remember, they made me a promise. One day, this will all be yours, Gianna. They said it every time I helped with Sunday brunch, every time I stayed up late doing dishes after a wedding party, every time I aced a test, and they beamed with pride, telling customers, "Our daughter's going to culinary school. She's going to be the future of this place." It became more than just a dream. It became my purpose, my identity. Every choice I made, what I studied, who I dated, what jobs I took during college, it all revolved around that promise. I didn't just want to inherit Amelia's Table. I wanted to earn it. And when I finally got accepted into the Culinary Institute of America in New York, my parents threw a party at the restaurant. My dad gave a toast in the middle of dinner service, with staff and regulars all clapping as he raised a glass to me. "She's the best of us," he said, choking up just a little. "She's going to take this place further than we ever dreamed." My chest swelled so full I could barely breathe. So when I graduated, top of my class, with internships at 2 Michelin-starred kitchens, I came home glowing. I thought this was it. My time. I had plans to modernize the menu, start hosting pop-up dinners, and even work toward a cookbook that told the story of how my parents built something from nothing. I was ready to step into their shoes. But the day I walked into Amelia's Table, diplomas still framed in bubble wrap, something felt off. My cousin Leo was there. Leo had always been around, in a way. He was a few years older than me and spent a couple summers working the front of house when he needed money during college. But he wasn't passionate about food. He never studied culinary arts. He wasn't obsessed with flavor profiles or the chemistry of baking. He was a business major who once joked, "Why cook when Uber Eats exists?" So why was he there, standing next to my mom behind the bar, wearing one of our staff polos like he belonged? I walked in, holding my diploma like a golden ticket, and my dad gave me a distracted smile, not the full-on bear hug I'd been expecting. "Hey, Guy," he said, like I'd just come back from a walk, not 4 years of hard work. My heart sank a little, but I brushed it off. Maybe it was just a busy day. "Hey," I said, trying to stay upbeat. "I was thinking, since I'm finally home, we could go over some of my ideas for updating the menu. I've got some sketches and—" My mom cut me off with a glance at Leo. "Actually," she said, wiping her hands on a towel, "Leo's been helping us with some of the business side stuff lately. He's got a real head for numbers. We've been thinking of letting him take over more of the day-to-day management so your dad and I can slow down a bit." I stared at them, waiting for the punchline. "So, Leo's managing the restaurant?" I asked slowly. "For now," my dad said. "We're trying it out. He's got some great ideas for boosting efficiency. And honestly, we can't keep up with all the new tech." I laughed, but it wasn't funny. I thought I was the one who was supposed to take over. "You've been telling me that since I was 5. There was a pause. That kind of silence where you realize something important just shifted under your feet. "Sweetheart," my mom said carefully, "you've been gone a long time. Things change. You're just getting back on your feet. Maybe you could assist in the kitchen again while we figure out what role makes sense for you." Assist in the kitchen. Like I was back to being a prep cook. Like the years I spent breaking my back in school, the sleepless nights studying for my certifications, the sacrifices I made. Didn't matter. I felt humiliated. I could barely swallow the lump in my throat. But this was supposed to be mine, I whispered, voice cracking. You promised. My dad looked away. My mom's expression softened, but it wasn't comforting. It was pitying. We just want what's best for the restaurant, she said. And for you. I wanted to scream. I am what's best for the restaurant. But I didn't. I just nodded, set down my diploma on the host stand, and walked out. Nobody followed me. That night, I sat alone in my childhood bedroom, now half storage for my mom's seasonal decorations, and stared at the walls. They still had the posters I'd hung up in high school. Anthony Bourdain, Julia Child. A photo of me at age 10, wearing an oversized apron and beaming as I held up my first lasagna. Everything I'd worked for was gone. No, worse, it was handed to someone else. Someone who didn't even want it until it was fully built, clean, and profitable. I wasn't just rejected. I was replaced. And as angry and heartbroken as I was, a quiet voice inside me whispered something even worse. Maybe they never really believed in you at all. But I wasn't about to let that be the end of my story. If I had to fight from the bottom, then so be it. They might have given Amelia's table to Leo, but I was going to build something better. Something that was mine. Even if it meant starting with nothing but a knife roll, an empty wallet, and a heart that felt like it had just been ripped in two. For the next 3 weeks, I tried to keep it together. I really did. I swallowed the lump in my throat and went back to Amelia's table like a good daughter, pretending I wasn't quietly dying inside every time I saw Leo walking around like he was the king of the castle. He had this smug confidence, like he'd always known the place would fall into his lap. He'd never lifted a pan in his life, but suddenly he was renaming menu items, restructuring shifts, and telling the chef I used to train under that his plating wasn't on brand anymore. And the worst part? My parents just let him. My mom made excuses. He's just helping. You'll have your chance, Gianna. But I wasn't blind. They weren't grooming me to take over anymore. They'd moved on. I'd gone from future heir to glorified line cook overnight. It stung in ways I can't even explain. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that they never actually saw me as enough. I was their daughter, sure. I was dependable. Hardworking. But Leo? He was the golden boy now. The businessman. The solution to their tired legs and aging backs. I went home every night covered in sauce, aching with exhaustion, and cried into my pillow until I couldn't breathe. I didn't tell anyone, not my old friends, not my classmates from culinary school, not even Kyle, the guy I'd been seeing off and on for the past year. I was too ashamed. How could I admit that everything I'd worked for was gone before it even started? But one night, I snapped. It was a Saturday. We were fully booked. The kitchen was a war zone, but in that weird, beautiful way kitchens can be when everything clicks, the rush, the rhythm, the dance of timing. I was on Sade killing it. My risottos were perfect. My timing was sharp. The staff was looking to me for cues, not Leo. That's when he walked in with a couple in fancy clothes, investors, apparently, and brought them straight into the kitchen. Right into our sacred space. He didn't even ask. Everyone, say hi to Jenna and Craig, he announced over the clatter of pans. They're thinking of franchising Amelia's table someday, just giving them a little behind-the-scenes tour. Franchising? My jaw dropped. We weren't a chain. We were a family-run restaurant. An institution. A legacy. I glared at him. Leo, we're mid-service. You can't just bring strangers back here. He smirked like I was being dramatic. Relax, Gianna. It's called vision. Something you might want to get on board with if you want to stay relevant. Something in me shattered. I stepped away from the stove, my risotto burning, and tore off my apron. If relevance means selling out my parents' soul for fast casual carbon copies, then maybe I'm not interested. The entire kitchen went quiet. Leo just shrugged. Suit yourself. But maybe it's time you realize this place isn't yours. I didn't even respond. I walked out, through the dining room. past the bar, right out the front door. And this time, I didn't come back. I wish I could tell you I had a master plan, that I knew exactly what I was doing when I packed up my knife set, booked a one-way Greyhound to Brooklyn, and crashed on a friend's couch. But the truth is, I was lost. I had no job, no savings, no connections outside of school. Just a folder full of recipes and a rage I couldn't put down. Those first few weeks were brutal. I worked the prep station at a dingy diner in Bushwick, slicing onions until my hands were raw. I pawned the watch my dad gave me for graduation to buy groceries. I missed rent twice. My friend, Maya, never complained, but I could feel myself wearing thin on her patience. One night, I sat on the fire escape with a warm beer and scrolled through my old Instagram posts, me smiling in my chef whites, standing proudly at graduation, hugging my parents at that big dinner they threw for me. It all felt like a lie now. I almost deleted the account. But then, I saw a message. It was from one of my old professors, Chef Mariel. She was one of the few instructors who'd always pushed me to find my own voice in food. The message was simple. Heard what happened. Don't quit. Come see me. I have a lead. That single message flipped a switch in me. I borrowed Maya's Metro card and went uptown to meet her. She greeted me with a warm hug and didn't mention how tired or hollow I looked. We talked for hours, and when I finally told her everything, how my parents handed over the restaurant, how I left with nothing, she didn't pity me. She just said, "Good. Now you're free." I blinked. Free? Gianna, you spent your whole life chasing their dream. Now you get to build yours. Start ugly. Start messy. But start. And then she gave me a name. A woman named Camila Rios, a pastry chef who ran an underground supper club in Crown Heights. She's always looking for talent, especially people with something to prove. I emailed Camila that night. She replied within 10 minutes. Be here tomorrow at 3. Bring a dish. One that tells me who you are. My hands trembled as I read it. Who was I now? Not the heir. Not the Rossi family pride. Not the golden girl. Just Gianna. Broken. Hungry. Angry. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up trying to figure out what I could possibly cook that would say everything I felt. And then it hit me. The one dish my parents always made when things were hard. The one they fed to neighbors when rent was late. The one they said saved their marriage after their first fight in the restaurant kitchen. Stracciatella soup. Simple. Humble. But layered with history. I infused mine with a twist, lemon zest, cracked pepper oil, and a Parmesan crisp on the side. I plated it in a wide bowl with hand-torn herbs and a ribbon of balsamic glaze. I brought it to Camilla's brownstone the next day, my heart pounding in my chest. She took one bite, then another, then looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Okay, you're in." And just like that, I had a new kitchen. Not a restaurant, not a title, but a tiny, makeshift supper club in someone's apartment where 30 strangers crammed around mismatched tables and passed plates like family. It was raw. It was imperfect. And for the first time in a long time, it was mine. Cooking in Camilla's underground supper club was nothing like working at Amelia's table. There were no polished granite countertops or state-of-the-art stoves. Her kitchen was cramped, her pans were scratched, and more than once we had to reroute the power mid-dinner because the rice cooker and the espresso machine couldn't be on at the same time. But it was alive. There was this crackling, messy magic to it. Every night was different. One evening we'd serve for a couple of food bloggers and a guy proposing to his girlfriend. The next, a group of artists celebrating a sold-out gallery show. There were mismatched chairs, thrifted china, and candles stuffed into old wine bottles. Nothing about it was perfect, and yet it was everything I'd been missing. I wasn't just a line cook there. I was part of the soul of something. Camilla challenged me constantly. "You play it safe," she told me during my first week. You cook like you're trying to earn approval from people who never gave it to you in the first place. That hit harder than she probably intended. But you've got flavor, she added, pointing to one of the pasta dishes I'd reinvented. You've got a story in your hands. Stop hiding it. So I started writing again, scribbling flavor ideas on receipts, drawing plating sketches on the backs of napkins, collecting little moments from the streets of Brooklyn and turning them into dishes. The steam from a street vendor's tamale cart turned into a smoked corn puree. The fire escape where I sat watching the city lights inspired a black garlic and chili oil drizzle I used on seared gnocchi. People noticed. One woman cried eating my wild mushroom risotto, saying it reminded her of something her grandmother used to make. Another regular, a retired Broadway costume designer, told me my lemon lavender panna cotta was the first dessert that ever made her feel like she was falling in love again. And for the first time in my life, my food wasn't just good, it was meaningful, personal, honest. Camilla gave me one Friday night a month to run the menu. Chef Jonna's table, she called it. It started slow, 8 people, then 12, then 20. By the fourth event, we were full with a waiting list. And somehow, that scared me more than failing ever did. Because a small part of me still wondered what my parents would say, if they even cared anymore. It had been 5 months since I walked out of Amelia's table when I finally heard from my dad. A text. Out of nowhere. Dad, heard you're doing some pop-up thing in Brooklyn. Hope you're eating. I stared at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to respond with some bitter one-liner, but I didn't. I didn't owe them my pain anymore. So I left him unread. But it stirred something in me. Because if he had heard about me, that meant others were talking too. Which was confirmed 2 weeks later when Camilla called me into her living room with a weird grin. You got mail, she said, holding up a manila envelope. It was a letter. From the Garden District Food Collective, a highly competitive group of chefs and creatives who ran seasonal pop-up showcases across the city. They'd seen photos of my dishes. Someone at one of our events had nominated me. They wanted me to submit a concept for a one-night-only event. A showcase. The theme? Roots. I sat on the couch, stunned. My hands were shaking. Camilla just smiled and said, "This is your moment, chef. Roots." The irony practically slapped me in the face. Because my roots were rotting. But maybe that's what made it perfect. I poured myself into the concept. Every dish told part of my story, what I had, what I lost, what I was reclaiming. I called it Ashes to Flavor. The amuse-bouche was a savory Parmesan tuile with a roasted onion jam, a nod to burnt bridges and quiet bitterness. The starter? A rustic tomato bisque with a twist, smoked garlic and charred basil, representing how something scorched could still bloom. The main course? Hand-rolled tagliatelle in a sauce made from slow-cooked beef, red wine, and bitter greens, because not everything tender starts sweet. And dessert? A reimagined version of stracciatella gelato, layered with lemon zest, olive oil, and sea salt, served in a cracked ceramic bowl. Because something broken could still be beautiful. The night of the event, I stood behind a folding table in a repurposed greenhouse with fairy lights strung above me and strangers buzzing with curiosity. Maya showed up, tears in her eyes. Camilla stood silently at the back, arms crossed, nodding once as if to say, "I knew you could." And then I saw them. My parents. Standing near the entrance. They looked older somehow. My mom's curls were pulled back tighter than usual. My dad wore the same jacket he used to for restaurant anniversaries. And beside them? Leo. Still smug. Still watching me like I was a kid playing grown-up. They weren't there to cheer me on. Not really. They were there because people were talking, and for the first time in months, I was the one being talked about. I didn't approach them. I didn't need to. I just cooked. I poured my entire soul into every plate. And when dessert hit the tables and I saw my mom raise a spoon to her lips, I froze for half a second. She closed her eyes, then opened them, looking directly at me across the room. She said nothing, but her expression cracked. And for a second, I saw regret. Not enough to fix what had been broken, but enough to know that she finally saw me again. Not as the kid who folded napkins or washed dishes, but as a chef, as a woman, as someone who rose from the ashes of their rejection and made flavor out of fire. After the event, I didn't win any award. There was no prize money, no interviews. But what I got was something far more valuable. Validation. On my own terms. I didn't go back to Amelia's table. Not then. Not ever, if I could help it. Because I was done trying to prove myself to people who couldn't see my worth until the world did. I was building something better. Something honest. Something mine. And I wasn't even close to done. After the Ashes to Flavor showcase, something shifted, not just in me, but around me. I stopped waiting for people to hand me opportunities. I stopped trying to prove my worth to those who didn't want to see it. Instead, I started building a brand. A real one. Camilla helped me design a pop-up series that traveled between local Brooklyn cafes, galleries, even rooftops. I named it Table for One, not because I cooked alone, but because it represented the independence I'd fought so hard for. Every event sold out within hours. Foodies came from Manhattan, Queens, even Jersey, just to taste my 4-course memory menus that told intimate stories through flavor. Local bloggers started posting about me. One even called me Brooklyn's broken dish Cinderella. I laughed when I read that, but it wasn't far off. Because I had been discarded, overlooked, treated like I was only ever meant to assist someone else's vision. But now I was creating my own. And as things grew, I started receiving messages, different kinds of messages. Not the subtle jabs from my dad. These were from strangers. Your dish reminded me of my grandmother's cooking. I haven't tasted anything like that since she passed. Thank you for reminding me that food can be healing. I never understood bitterness until I tasted your burnt lemon tart. Now I get it. Each message felt like a small stitch in a wound I hadn't realized I was still carrying. I didn't talk to my parents again. They didn't reach out after the showcase. I guess I thought they might, but maybe they were too proud. Or maybe they just couldn't admit they'd been wrong. And I told myself that was okay. I didn't need closure from them. Or so I thought. It was almost a year after I'd left home when I got the call. I was prepping for a collaboration dinner when Maya came running into the kitchen, her phone in hand. You need to sit down, she said, eyes wide. What's going on? I asked, wiping my hands. She hesitated. It's Amelia's table. There was a fire. My heart stopped. I grabbed the phone, hands shaking, and opened the article. It wasn't just a small kitchen fire. It was a full-on electrical blaze. The dining room was gone. The walls blackened. The roof caved partially inward. Nobody was hurt. It happened after closing, but the restaurant was destroyed. My mouth went dry. I hadn't set foot there in nearly a year. I thought I was done with that place, with that chapter. But as I stared at the charred ruins in the photos, my throat tightened in a way I couldn't explain. That was the place I learned how to cook. The place where I used to sneak cookies when no one was looking. The place where my dreams were born and died. And now, it was gone. 2 days later, I got another message. From Leo. Hey, I know things have been weird. But my parents are a wreck. They don't know what to do. The insurance claim is a mess. We could really use your help. I stared at the screen for a long time. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to laugh and delete it and say, oh, now you need me? But something deeper stirred inside me. Something I didn't want to admit. This wasn't just about them anymore. This was about legacy. My legacy. Because whether or not they wanted to admit it, I was part of that place. And that place was part of me. So I said yes. But not in the way they expected. I drove back to my hometown for the first time in nearly a year. When I pulled up to Amelia's table, the smell of smoke still lingered in the air. The windows were boarded up, and ash coated the sidewalk like fallen snow. My parents stood outside. They looked small. My mom's face was pale, her eyes rimmed with red. My dad had lost weight. Even Leo looked humbled. My heart hurt. Not with sympathy, with understanding. They'd poured their whole lives into this place. They didn't know anything else. And now, the dream they protected so fiercely, so stubbornly, was in ruins. Gianna, my mom whispered when she saw me. Her voice cracked. Thank you for coming. I nodded, stiff. I'm not here to clean up your mess. I'm here to offer a solution. My dad looked up, surprised. A solution? Leo asked cautiously. I took a deep breath. Let me rebuild it. But under one condition. They waited. It's mine now. Legally. On paper. No more promises. No more maybes. If I'm going to save what's left, it's going to be on my terms. My mom blinked, stunned. Gianna, I'm not doing this for you, I said softly. I'm doing it for what that place used to mean. For the community. For the food. For the memories that deserve better than to be buried under Leo's spreadsheets and your silence. They didn't argue. Not this time. Because they finally saw what I was made of. Not just talent. Not just skill. But fire. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. I took out a business loan. Called in every favor I had in New York. Maya helped with branding. Camilla connected me with suppliers. Even a couple of chefs from the supper club volunteered to help me demo and redesign the space. And when we reopened, it wasn't Amelia's table anymore. It was Gianna. Simple. Bold. Honest. The walls were repainted with warm terracotta and soft lighting. The kitchen was open concept, so guests could watch the food being created in real time. The menu was short but personal dishes that told stories. About pain. About healing. About reclaiming what's yours when the world tries to take it from you. On opening night, the line wrapped around the block. Bloggers came. So did Camilla. Even Maya's mom. And my parents? They came too. But they sat quietly in the back, hands folded, watching me command a kitchen they no longer recognized. And when I brought out a plate of stracciatella soup, my signature, reimagined again, my dad stood up, walked over, and said quietly, "You made something better than we ever could have imagined." I didn't cry. Not then. I just nodded and whispered, "I know." Because by then, I didn't need their permission. I had already become everything they failed to believe I could be. And I did it all from scratch. Just like they once did. The first night at Gianna felt like stepping into a dream I didn't even know I was allowed to have. The dining room hummed with laughter and clinking silverware. The open kitchen was warm with energy. And every plate that left the past was a story I had lived, survived, and now served to the world on porcelain. And yet, even in the glow of that success, there were still moments where doubt tried to creep in. Moments when I looked into the crowd and wondered if people were there because they believed in me, or because they were curious about the girl who'd once been passed over and now stood center stage. Moments when I still felt like that invisible daughter peeling potatoes in the back of Amelia's table. But then someone would stop me, on the street, or at the register, and say something like, "I brought my mom here. She cried eating your pasta. Said it reminded her of home." Or, "Your dessert made me feel seen." And in those moments, the doubt shrank. Just a little. Because I realized that the thing I had always wanted, validation from them, had been replaced with something far more powerful. Respect. Not just from strangers. From myself. 2 months after reopening, I got an unexpected visitor. Leo. I hadn't seen him since the fire. Since I made him watch me take over the ashes of what he thought he was going to run. He stood awkwardly by the front counter, shifting from foot to foot like he didn't quite know how to exist in a space that no longer bowed to his ambition. "Hey," he said, avoiding my eyes. I leaned against the host stand, arms crossed. "Didn't think you'd ever set foot in here again." I didn't either, he said with a weak laugh. But I've been watching. From a distance. I just wanted to say, you did good. It wasn't much. But coming from Leo, it was practically an apology in all caps. Thanks, I said, not letting him off the hook too easily. Though I remember a time when you thought I was too emotional to run a kitchen. He flinched, then nodded. I was wrong. I could have dragged it out. I could have listed every way he hurt me, every moment he benefited from what I was denied. But the truth was, I didn't need to anymore. Because Leo no longer had power over my story. I did. You want a table? I asked, straightening. He looked surprised. Yeah, actually, I do. I handed him a menu. Sit in the back. Try the gnocchi. He smiled. Is it the same as Nona's? No, I said, smiling back. It's better. By the time we hit the 6-month mark, the restaurant was booked solid 3 weeks out. I was featured in a local magazine. A journalist from a national food blog wrote a glowing review and called me a rising voice in American cuisine. Camilla came to visit once a week, usually unannounced, usually just to give me one of those quiet looks that said, I told you so. Maya had become my part-time PR manager, even though she still joked that all she really wanted was unlimited access to my burnt lemon tart. And me? I was finally breathing. Not just surviving. Not just proving myself. Thriving. But just when I thought my story had reached its full arc, something happened that brought it full circle. One quiet Tuesday afternoon, I was cleaning the past after lunch when I noticed a young girl hovering by the open kitchen. She looked maybe 13. Long dark hair. Wide, curious eyes. She was clutching a tattered notebook. I walked over and crouched beside her. Hey, everything okay? She looked startled, then nervous. You're Chef Gianna, right? I smiled. That's me. She hesitated. My name's Olivia. I come here with my mom sometimes. I love your food. I want to be a chef too someday. There was something so familiar in the way she clutched that notebook. Like I was looking at myself 20 years ago. You got any recipes in there? I asked, nodding toward her notebook. She nodded shyly and opened it. Pages filled with handwritten lists, drawings of dishes, notes on flavor ideas. It was beautiful. I blinked hard, overwhelmed by emotion. Want to see the kitchen? I asked. Her eyes lit up. Really? I led her inside, showed her the prep stations, let her stir a pot of tomato broth. And when she looked at me and said, someday I want to have a place like this, I knelt down and said the words I had once clung to with everything I had. You will. Just don't let anyone else write your story for you. Because that was the lesson I had to burn down my entire world to learn. I was always enough. I didn't need to inherit something to make something of my own. I didn't need to be chosen. I just needed to choose myself. It's funny. My parents still come in sometimes. My mom always sits near the window. My dad always orders the same thing, ravioli with brown butter and sage, the one dish I refuse to change from the original menu. They smile at me now. They compliment the food. They sometimes even stay after hours to help fold napkins. We never had some big, emotional sit-down conversation. There was no tearful apology, no dramatic confession. Just a slow, quiet rebuilding, like carefully mending a frayed tablecloth, one stitch at a time. I don't think they meant to hurt me the way they did. But that doesn't excuse it. What matters now is that they see me, not just as their daughter, but as the woman who rose from the dust of their disappointment and created something stronger. Something that couldn't be taken away. So yeah, they gave everything to my cousin. They doubted me. They underestimated me. But that was their mistake, not mine. Because in trying to keep me small, they lit the fire that made me burn brighter than they ever expected. And now people come from all over to sit at my table. To hear my story through the dishes I serve. To taste every ounce of pain, resilience, and redemption I poured into each bite. I may have started at rock bottom, but I built a kitchen on top of it, and I made it my own. Not because they believed in me, but because I finally believed in myself.